I've seen this theory going around, or actually, it's not a very common theory, but I did hear about it on YouTube. And the theory is that the new airbenders in Book 3 Change and the Legend of Korra are actually descended from airbenders that survived Sozin's attack. So the theory is that there were some survivors of the invasion of the Fire Nation invasion. So when Sozin attacked the air temples, there were some survivors that made it into the Earth Kingdom and basically settled in and sort of hid their identities and lost touch with their roots as air nomads, and they just assimilated into the Earth Kingdom to stay hidden. And then many years later, their descendants are the airbenders who started popping up in Book 3, Legend of Korra. And so I think the theory is that um, after the harmonic convergence, it caused a um, major event that sort of sparked the that sort of caused the descendants of those air nomads to become airbenders, something like that. It's I don't really know the details of the theory, but that's the gist of it. And I don't remember who came up with it either, but it was I saw it somewhere, so I forget where exactly. So I will say that I don't agree with the theory, but I think that a part of it has some merit. So my thought is that the air benders that start popping up in Book 3 of Legend of Korra, um, are in fact descended from air nomads of the past. So I do believe that part is true because I find it odd that harmonic convergence, regardless of how spectacular and mysterious it is, would simply randomly cause airbenders to pop out of the Earth Kingdom. Like, if that was the case, why wouldn't they also be popping up? If it was random, then why wouldn't they also be popping out of the Fire Nation and the Water Tribes? Like, I wonder. And the second part of it is that Boomy, Avatar Aang's son, who was a non-bender, suddenly becomes an airbender. So it's almost like harmonic convergence. The effects of harmonic convergence chose specific descendants of airbenders and turned them into airbenders. So now let's get to the details of my theory because I haven't done a very good job of explaining it at the moment. So my theory is that in the past, way before the Hundred-Year War, so way before Aang, and probably way before Roku, there were just a handful of airbenders that, air nomads that didn't want to live the air nomad lifestyle, and so they settled in the Earth Kingdom. And there, we actually do have a concrete example of this. So Avatar Kyoshi's father was of the Earth Kingdom, obviously, but Avatar Kyoshi's mother was actually an air nomad, and she was a renegade air nomad. She had given up her air nomad lifestyle to pursue a life of fun, and she so she wasn't living the air nomad lifestyle anymore, and she had settled in the Earth Kingdom, and she was doing all these things. And so I find it hard to believe that she would be the only air nomad to do that because maybe there were many other air nomads who were just tired of living the air nomad lifestyle and they decided to move out. So they decided to settle in the Earth Kingdom, and over time, since they were no longer in touch with their spiritual roots, they they gave up everything of the air nomad culture and just married into the Earth Kingdom, settled in, assimilated, and then they had descendants. And so maybe their descendants are the airbenders that start popping up in book 3 of Legend of Korra. So we've seen with Avatar Kyoshi's mother, the air nomad, her airbending abilities become weaker as she moves away from her air nomad lifestyle and as she pursues a life of crime and villainy and fun. Her spirituality becomes extremely weak, and so her bending becomes weak, and she has to use fans to support her bending because that's how bad it's gotten. And so I think that maybe the other air nomads in that situation, maybe the other air nomads that gave up the air nomad lifestyle also lost their spirituality and their bending got weaker over time. And as they assimilated into the Earth Kingdom, their children ended up being maybe non benders or maybe Earth benders, depending on who they married and what their family genes were. And then over time, the air bending within their families just disappeared and there were less and less. And I would think that and this is probably not talked about as much because maybe the air nomads aren't really too happy about people who, other air nomads who leave them, like who leave to go and pursue different lifestyles. And I think that it's just probably something that they wouldn't want to talk about and that wouldn't be brought up. So maybe they would omit that. And we've also seen that there are some airbenders out there that really stand out and really act differently. So Kelsang, for instance, who was Avatar Kirk's friend and Avatar Kyoshi's friend, Kelsang, I believe, was no longer really part of the Air Temple because they didn't want him. And actually haven't read the book, so I don't know the details. But from what I understand, Kelsang was sort of not welcome. And thousands of years before that, Guru Lahima, if you remember, was the only known air nomad other than Zahir who could fly. And so I'm sure Guru Lahima led a different lifestyle. And, like, of course, the case is very different with Guru Lahima is because he managed to detach from the world, and that's why he was managing to fly. So he was really in touch with his spirituality. But the point I'm making there is that air nomads are still individuals and many of them did pursue their own lifestyles. So my assumption will be that before the Hundred-Year War, before Aang, before even Roku, and maybe during the time of Kyoshi, and even before that, there were a handful of air nomads that just deviated from that lifestyle and just settled in the Earth Kingdom and assimilated and lost their spirituality and bending over time. And they kept having descendants, and by the time of the Legend of Korra in Book 3, those descendants were still living. And after the harmonic convergence happened, when there was a big spiritual awakening, let's say, that probably the residual effect caused those descendants of the air nomads to gain airbending abilities that their ancestors had had. So I know I've talked a lot and it sounds a little complicated and convoluted, but my main point is way before Aang and Roku and maybe during the time of Kyoshi and before that, there were airbenders who didn't want to live the air nomad lifestyle, so they settled in the Earth Kingdom, married Earth Kingdom people, and assimilated into the culture and lost, and their descendants, and they kept having descendants, and then those descendants became the airbenders that we see in Book 3 of Legend of Korra. I think that theory makes sense to me, and like I said, it's just a theory. I have no proof of this, just what we've seen. And so those are my thoughts, and I wonder if we'll ever get an answer on this or what the case will be.